Good afternoon. My name is Simon Coady. I'm originally from Iqaluit, Nunavut, Canada, and now I live in Ottawa for the past 12 years, the capital city of Canada. I am a cultural presenter for the Inuit Center for Inuit Children, Youth, and Families. For the Bridging the Gap program, I go into schools across the Ottawa area and around the Ottawa area to educate students from junior kindergarten to grade 12 about Inuit culture, Inuit history, intergenerational trauma, more topics along the lines of residential schools, relocation, and as well as other issues that go on in the Inuit community. I've been living in Ottawa for about 12 years, about half my life. I include myself in the local Indigenous community and initiatives. I do a lot of presentations. That's a little bit about myself, I guess. I'm originally from Iqaluit. I guess that's a little bit about about me.
Huingao kesaugo nunaka minguloshu angaya kangagalgago uyang linshu atamasu angayokak atmasor mingulutik anmaswa angayokak nunaka mingulutik. Hello everyone, my name is Byron Nikolai. I'm from Tooksuk Bay, Alaska. That's from the southwest part of Alaska. The population is a little under 800, so I'm from a very small community. And I'm from the Nunakaw Yupik tribe, and I'm a former Arctic Youth Ambassador, and I'm an ambassador for the Yupik.
All right, so I'll ask them a few questions about their experiences and work that they do with regards to suicide prevention. So what has been your experience with suicide in your community?
My experience with suicide within my community has become a normal thing. I feel like for a lot of my peers that I've grown up with, it is regular for you to have someone in your family or a close friend who had committed suicide. The way that I explain it to a non-Indigenous crowd while I'm doing presentations at schools is that it's become very normal. It's a regular thing. It's part of our everyday life. I remember growing up and hearing stories of friends who had committed suicide at the age of like young as 12, 13. So at a young age, it was introduced to become a normal thing. And it's very unfortunate that this is the reality that we live in. But I have a lot of friends and a lot of peers who have their own personal stories as well of close friends, family who had committed suicide, and they have their own views on it. And unfortunately, it's just become a regular thing. So for me, even though it's kind of like an epidemic in the Arctic, it's something that I'm very used to.
So the first experience I had was, I believe, I might have been 6 or 7 years old. It was my older cousin. I remember hearing about that he took his own life, and my mother and her sisters were speaking kind of secretly, but I was young enough to be there, and they probably thought that I wouldn't be understanding what they were talking about. And then I remember they said that they don't want my grandmother to know that he committed suicide because they didn't want to stress her out. And so we were in that community. Everyone knew about it except my grandma until the day of the funeral, which was at least 4 days later. And so I remember just sitting next to my mom and my grandmother, and she kept asking, "Gija chakka, are you sure it was Kenny? Are you sure it was Kenny? You sure he killed himself?" And then it was earlier, I believe it was last year, my cousin, who is pretty much a younger brother to me, I grew up with him, we went to preschool together, we were in the same grade. He took his own life, and then that's when it really hit me, because he's my younger brother. And there are times where I'm thinking of moments, precious moments that I had with him, and I'm starting to think, man, those were some good times. And then you realize that it was just it was just me and him who were at that moment. And so there's really no one to remember those moments with. And it just really it really hits me that those moments that I have with him are only mine now and no one else's. And I can't really share them with anyone. And then right after his suicide, it was another one in the community. I believe it was 2 months later. It was his first cousin on his mom's side. And so in the community, we've had about 3 suicides in the span of 2 years. And all of those 3 suicides, they were young men, all younger than me. One of them had to have been 18. Both of them had to have actually been 18, and one of them was 19. And 2 of them were in the same grade, and one of them was my younger brother. And so there's been suicide in small communities like Arctic communities. It's been around for a while, and I've thought about it a lot. And part of why I feel like it would have been why I feel like there'd be a lot of suicide is because we're living in such small communities. I mean, imagine how many people are supposed to be in this room, about 2,000. So imagine about half of that in one community, and you just see everyone every day. It's always the same thing. We don't have restaurants, we don't have cafes, we don't have malls. The only places where we could go are the community centers, and that's where they have bingos, and that's where they have meetings, not very much to do for the youth. And so we're stuck every day looking for things to do. And then during the winter it gets worse because you're pretty much doing the same thing every day, except it gets darker quick. And imagine putting yourself in a room where there's no lights, where it's dark outside, where there's not really much to do. I mean, that just kind of puts you in a position where you're telling yourself, is it going to be like this for a while? I mean, I'm in a small community. I feel like there's no way out. We're going to be doing this pretty much for the rest of our lives.
Thank you. The next question is, what is your connection with some of the suicide prevention work that is taking place in your region or your community?
The work that I do within my community involves empowering the youth, empowering the next generation to come up learning more about their culture, learning more about their language, connecting them to elders, connecting them to knowledge keepers, so we can get the passion going for our culture that seems to be eroding away slowly. Personally, I take a big toll on trying to be a male role model in my community specifically, because there's not that many male role models for these youth to look up to. And I remember being one of those youth not too long ago where I didn't have many people to look up to, where I had to deal with helping myself, where I didn't have much access to these programs and these community workers that could help me get through it, not just by myself, but through a community initiative, through a way of doing it the traditional way, in a sense, where long time ago we would always help each other in our communities. We were always selfish and selfless at the same time. We weren't too much on one side, so we understood what it was like to need help. And now that I know that I'm in a position that I can help these youth, I really try a lot to empower them through engaging sessions, whether it's cultural sessions or just talking about their problems, their everyday life. Because, like I said earlier, I was one of those kids who went through dark times, dark moments in my own mind where I came close to taking my own life because I just thought there was not much more to look forward to.
When I was in 6th grade, I was 12 years old. I remember there's a counselor that comes by our school every month because we live in such a small community that the school wouldn't have enough money to have a counselor there all the time. So this counselor would come to, I believe it was 7 different schools in a month, because there's so many different small communities where I'm from. And then so he would go to each community looking for, not looking, but seeking if students need someone to talk to. Now I remember telling myself that it wouldn't be worth it. And then, there was this one time when I was younger where I thought of suicide myself. And then I just gave it a shot. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And then I spoke with him. His name is Jim Bila. And I spoke with him, and ever since then, he's been in my life. He's been helping me do workshops in the community, do suicide prevention. I remember this one year we won an award for the International Survivors of Suicide Lost Day. And that's pretty much the only suicide prevention that could happen in this very small community, other than dance practice, which is happening every week. Now, when you live in a small community, what could you do for suicide prevention? You don't have that much resource. You don't have that many people to talk to. The majority of the people are young adults or kids like myself. And then so when you're at an age where you're not sure where to go to, then who are you going to go to? And then so that's where the dance practice comes in. And for me personally, it's helped me out a lot. I've been going to dance practice for about, I think it was 7 to 8 years now. Now, I graduated high school about 3 years ago, and I still go to it every week, and I'm there with the students. And that's pretty much the only suicide prevention that we could have in the community, so small, other than, dance practice or doing traditional things. I remember my brother, he said his favorite thing to do was when I'd take him out hunting. And then so, I've realized it doesn't have to be talking with someone. It could be doing something with a loved one, just going out hunting with them, taking them boating. And so I've been trying to take him out hunting, and I think it's going very well. It's not going how I would want it to, because growing up, my father left us when I was 14. Now, when you're living in a small community like that, you're going to have to provide for your family as a young man. You're going to have to hunt for the food, because the food it's very expensive. Like a gallon of milk in US dollars would probably be $12 just for a gallon of milk. And then where you could get gas, some bullets, and a rifle, that would feed your family for a whole month if you caught a seal. A whole month. Now take that over that $12 gallon of milk. And then so I didn't have anyone to teach me how to do that. It was very difficult for me. 14 years old. I don't know how to drive a boat. I don't know how to use a snow machine. I can't go buy my own bullets. And then so it was very hard for me to look for help, but it was there. And so after I got the help, I realized how much help it was for me. So I was starting to think that it would have been a big help for my younger brother. I know what he's going through, and I'd like to help out.
Thank you. So you've talked about some gaps already, but Simon or Byron, what are the gaps or areas for improvement that you see in the suicide prevention work?
The gaps that I've noticed so far is the awareness on mental health nowadays. In this day and age, it's becoming more prevalent that mental health is very important. But as I was growing up as a young man, it wasn't as prevalent. Now that we're focusing more on mental health, it's more on the empowering side of our youth than it is on making them focus on what's so bad in their lives. We're trying to find out how can they find something or an outlet that gets them to do something positive for themselves, whether that's through, like Byron said, taking them out boating or cultural teachings or having those discussions that very difficult to have, because even when I was going through all of these things, all of these dark thoughts, I remember when I had came to the exploding point when I was about 16 years old with my teacher. I told him everything that I was going through at that moment. And he was so surprised to realize that I was going through all of that. He had no clue what was going on at home. He had no clue what was going on in my life. So the gaps that I've noticed so far is having awareness, having people talk more about mental health, focus more on empowering than making it a stigma. There are many gaps, but I feel like that is the biggest gap so far.
To me, the biggest gap would be the lack of support for our Indigenous men, mostly the men, because if you look at the statistics, it's the guys or the men that are killing themselves the most. Now, why I think is because for me, in our community, no, Tuksuk Bay didn't become a community until 1964. So in 1964 so before then, they were always constantly moving. And then for the men, they want us to be strong. It's like the mental health isn't as important as it is for women. It's kind of like, you're a man, cheer up, high five, you'll be good. That's it. But now in today, you see that mental health is very important for everyone. It's what keeps us going. It's what helps us get up in the morning to do something. I've realized that I do more when I feel better about myself. I'm sure it's the same way with everyone too. You do more when you feel better about yourself. Now when you have the support there, just imagine how our men could be doing. The lack of support for Indigenous males is the biggest gap that I see for suicide prevention in the Arctic communities.
Thank you. So what are important considerations in international Indigenous suicide prevention work?
So I think we should consider that, like I just said in the previous answer, that it's the men we need to focus on the most. I mean, of course we should focus on both men and women, but just from looking at the statistics, you would think that we should be focusing on the men more. I think that's what I think.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so what are some important things to consider when doing international suicide prevention work with Indigenous people?
I would say probably looking at learning about those specific Indigenous cultures to see if there's any similarities between cultures, to see, like I was saying, to find something that is similar to find empowerment on, whether it's similarities through culture or games even, celebrations, ceremonies, traditions, to find stuff within our cultures that make us feel like we connect with others, because we're all human. We're just from different areas of the globe. We all have different skin colors, but we are all very different, but at the same time we're very similar. And once we find out, or once we realize fully that we are very similar, I feel like the next step will start coming forward a little bit more easier than it has in the past.
So you've both talked a lot about the things you're doing in your communities to help fight suicide, and so what are some things that you do for yourself for self-care, or where do you get support when you need it?
Specifically me, in my community, fortunately I live in a city. I live in the Ottawa area. We have a large Inuit population outside of the Arctic, and I luckily work at an organization that is a community center which has a lot of people and a lot of support for me. So whenever I'm having a hard time or feeling like I really need a shoulder or a crutch, I always go to my male role models in the community that probably don't even feel like they're role models. to themselves. The people that I look up to, the men that I feel like are spiritually strong. And if I can't get a hold of those guys, honestly, I just do it by myself. I take time for self-care. I do a lot of alone time. I take a lot of time where I think and recharge by myself. In some cases, I do wish I had more support or more access or more knowledge on where to find the support, but because I'm very busy doing my work, I feel like sometimes I do brush it underneath the rug. But in turn of doing that, I've been able to take care of myself, like I was saying, all alone. So there are many outlets, but I feel like most of it I do by myself.
I feel like I'm my own biggest supporter. That's what I truly believe. I remember growing up, so I lost my grandmother when I was 10. I lost my dad. Well, I didn't really lose my dad. My dad just kind of, left me and my brothers and my mom and my sisters when I was 14. And I lost a brother just earlier last year. And then, growing up, I kind of prepared myself for moments like that. I've always told myself, okay, you're going to go through everything in your life. Might as well prepare for it. I mean, if you think about it, you're going to go through everything. You're going to gain something. You're going to lose someone. And if you lose yourself, then you've already lost. Now, I told myself, growing up, through minor problems, I told myself, okay, you came across a problem. You're going to deal with it. And then once you've dealt with it, when you deal with it again in the future, you're going to know what to do. So just do the same steps because you've already been there before. And then if it's something new, deal with it, then you'll be ready if it comes to you again in the future. And so just being able to do that, I feel like I'm ready for what life is going to throw at me. And then my biggest thing for me is to never lose myself, and realize that nothing is always going to go my way. There's going to be some big bumps. Life is a roller coaster. I'm sure we've all heard that, but no, it really is. Even though we've already heard that, you truly have to understand it. You have to be ready to lose someone. You have to be ready to, take a major step back. And if you don't, then you're just expecting your life to kind of be like a smooth sailing. Well, it's not really going to be. You got to think of it. It's really not going to be. So just knowing that has helped me throughout every endeavor in my life. So I would say that I'm my own biggest supporter.
Well, thank you so much both for sharing. We have just 2 minutes for questions, but they will be around and they will be at the breakout session tomorrow. So if you don't get a question in right now, you can ask it another time. So if there are questions.
Don't be shy.
Somebody in the back over there.
Oh, you just told me.
Oh, right there. Okay.
I'm sorry. Please.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jessie Fraser from Nunavut in Canada. Thank you so much for talking about these issues. I wanted to ask sort of a two-parter. Would you guys be able to talk about the connection between the colonization of Indigenous people in Canada and the States and outside, and the issues you're facing today, and how you're talking about what you're doing and the work that you see people doing to address these issues. How can allies help in that work?
I feel like more networking between organizations, between certain people, between higher ups, between all of these Indigenous communities as well. and the organizations that claim to be as allies. I feel like we need to network a little bit more, probably share more of our information, more of the critical, more of the what's that word? Vital information, a little bit sensitive information with each other, to see if there's something that we can work towards as a whole instead of being a small crutch trying to hold something up. It's like it takes a village. It's that same quote. It takes a village to raise a kid, to raise a child, the same way that it would take the whole world to come together to really impact on these issues that are very prevalent in our society today.
To me, colonization, I think it's like someone coming into your room who thinks they're smarter and goes, okay, we're not going to do it like that. Here's a way, you should do it like this. This is the way, this is the answer. I feel like if you do it, you'll feel better. That's not a way that we should really move forward. I don't think that's how it should be. Now, thank you. Now, the way we should move forward is to learn to coexist with each other. Know that we all have some differences. Accept the differences. You may not agree with it, but if it's something that they've been doing for most of their lives, then let them be happy. I mean, you may not exist with it, but they're not there for you. They're there for themselves and their family and their people. And so that's what I think.
Byron, man. One quote that I like teaching people is that no matter where you come from in this world, you're always going to be uncomfortable to something that you don't understand. Once you begin to understand it, it's not as uncomfortable anymore.
All right, thank you. We are out of time, but like I said, if you want to catch our breakout session tomorrow, they will be there. We have an hour for that breakout session, so there should be more time for questions.